It started as an ordinary winter night in a quiet town outside London, the kind where the streets fall silent by 10 p.m. and the only sound is the distant hum of passing traffic. But on this particular night, something felt slightly off. The air was unusually still, and even the security guard at the small convenience store on Hilford Road kept glancing at the CCTV monitor, as if waiting for something to happen. At 11:43 p.m., the camera outside the store camera 04 picked a lone woman walking down the empty pavement. She wasn't running, she wasn't panicking, but her movement had a strange stiffness to it, almost mechanical. She kept looking over her shoulder every few seconds, as if she felt someone behind her. Yet the footage clearly showed no one else in the frame. The guard leaned closer, confused. The woman suddenly stopped under a streetlight, her shadow stretching unnaturally long behind her. She turned slowly, almost like she heard something directly in her ear. Then she stepped backward toward the camera 3 steps, deliberate, controlled before freezing completely. Her face lifted slightly toward the lens, eyes wide open but unfocused, like she was staring through the camera rather than at it. For a moment, the footage flickered, glitching as if the signal dropped, even though the system had never malfunctioned before. When the picture stabilized, the woman was no longer looking at the camera. She was gone, vanished from the frame entirely, not walking away, not running, just gone. The guard rewound the footage in panic, watching every second carefully. She was there, then the glitch, and then the empty pavement. He checked all surrounding cameras, no trace, no movement, no sound. It was as if she had stepped out of existence in a single blink. Moments later, a cold shiver passed through him as he realized something chilling. The streetlight where she stood continued flickering for several seconds afterward, as if reacting to something that should still be there. And then, at exactly midnight, the CCTV timed event log registered a motion alert from the same spot she vanished. The motion alert ping echoed through the tiny security room, making the guard jump in his chair. His fingers trembled slightly as he clicked on the live feed from camera 04. The pavement was still empty, no woman, no movement, nothing but the faint shimmer of the flickering streetlight. Yet the alert wouldn't stop. It kept flashing on the screen. Motion detected 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 3 seconds. The guard leaned so close, his breath fogged the monitor, trying to find any sign of what the camera was reacting to. A plastic bag on the ground wasn't moving. The shadows weren't shifting. Even the trees in the background were completely still, frozen in the cold midnight air. And yet the camera insisted something was there. He switched to thermal mode out of desperation. Even though the store cameras rarely picked up clear heat signatures from a distance. But what he saw made his chest tighten. Right under the streetlight, exactly where the woman disappeared, a faint human-shaped outline glowed on the thermal display, standing completely still. No movement, no details, just a warm silhouette where no person could be seen on the regular camera feed. It stood for 3 seconds, then dissolved, fading into the background temperature like smoke thinning into the air. Heart pounding, he opened the archived footage from an hour earlier to compare the heat readings. Everything was normal then. No strange silhouettes, no glitches, no anomalies. He replayed the recent footage again, hoping he'd misinterpreted something. But the thermal image appeared exactly the same. A human presence without a body. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that the camera detected but the eye couldn't see. The guard felt a sudden pressure behind him, like the air in the room grew heavier. Instinctively, he turned around, half expecting someone to be standing right behind him. But the room was empty. Still, the uneasy weight lingered in the air, as if he wasn't alone anymore. His hand hovered over the phone. Should he call the police? Should he report a missing person? A malfunctioning camera? None of those explanations felt right. Something was deeply wrong. As he turned back toward the monitors, the feed glitched again just for a fraction of a second. A smear of static. A distorted shadow stretching across the pavement. And for that split second, he thought he saw her face again, pale, frozen, staring directly into the camera, just like before. When the image returned to normal, the pavement was empty. But the motion alert activated again, louder this time. The screen flashing red, as if screaming at him to understand one terrifying truth. Something was still standing there. Something the camera could see, but he couldn't. The guard could feel his heartbeat echoing in his ears as the motion alert kept blinking relentlessly, each flash pulling him deeper into a sense of dread he'd never experienced before. He muted the alarm, but the trembling in his fingers betrayed the calm he tried to fake. He zoomed the camera lens all the way in, focusing on the pavement where the woman had vanished. The image sharpened, revealing tiny details he hadn't noticed earlier. A faint circular pattern on the ground, almost like the residue left behind after something extremely hot touched the pavement. It was subtle, nearly invisible under normal lighting, but under digital zoom it formed a perfect ring, just big enough for a person to stand inside. And it hadn't been there the previous night. Before he could process this, a new notification popped up. Camera 05. Side alley motion detected. The guard froze. Camera 05 was positioned behind the store, facing a narrow service alley that rarely saw any activity except for delivery trucks during the day. He switched to the live feed. The alley was pitch dark except for a small patch illuminated by a distant lamp. At first glance, nothing was moving. But then he noticed the trash bins on the left side seemed slightly shifted, as if someone had brushed past them recently. The lid on one bin was trembling, vibrating lightly, though there was no wind at all. He leaned closer and squinted. Something dark slipped behind the bins, too quick for the camera to fully capture. A blur, a human-shaped outline darting deeper into the alley. It wasn't the woman. This figure moved unnaturally fast, almost gliding instead of walking. The guard pulled the feed back 10 seconds and replayed it frame by frame. With every click, the figure became clearer, until one frame stopped him cold. The silhouette was facing the camera. Not fully visible, just a shadow, but the head was slightly tilted, as if observing him through the lens. A shock ran through his spine. Whoever or whatever it wasn't behaving like a normal person. He checked the system logs. No door sensors were triggered. No other external cameras detected anyone approaching the area. How did the figure enter the alley without being recorded? Why were all the movements happening near the store, centered around the place where the woman disappeared? His fear deepened as he switched to camera 06, pointed at the store's rear exit. The faint sound of static broke through the speakers. The video quality flickered for a moment, and then stabilized. The rear exit door was closed, but the security light above it was blinking rapidly, as if short-circuiting. The guard watched silently, praying the light would stop. Instead, it suddenly went out, plunging the entire rear area into darkness, then dashed slowly. Almost deliberately, a shadow formed on the door surface. A tall, elongated shape that didn't match any human proportion. It stretched upward until it almost touched the frame, and then, with a soft metallic click, The rear exit door's handle began turning on its own. The guard's breath caught in his throat as the rear exit handle twitched again, this time more forcefully, as if someone was gripping it from the outside. The metal creaked softly, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room. He reached instinctively for the security baton hanging by the desk, but his hand froze halfway. What good was a baton against something he couldn't even see on the normal camera feed? A cold bead of sweat trickled down the side of his face as the handle gave one final jerk, then stopped. The silence that followed felt even heavier than before, like the air itself was holding its breath. Slowly, the guard leaned in to check the live feed again. The rear exit door hadn't opened, but the shadow on the surface was gone. It had simply vanished, leaving behind only the faint reflection of the blinking monitor lights. He switched back to camera 05, hoping whatever had moved in the alley was also gone. But the bins were now perfectly still, the alley empty. Nothing out of place. Not a single hint that anything had ever been there at all. His throat tightened. Shadows didn't manipulate door handles. Glitches didn't shift heavy bins. And thermal signatures didn't appear where no body existed. He forced himself to stand, knees shaking, and stepped toward the store's main floor to check the doors in person. As he opened the security room door, the store lights flickered once, twice, and then steadied. He scanned the aisles, nothing but shelves, quiet and undisturbed. But the moment he stepped forward, a subtle clicking sound echoed from above. He looked up. The small speaker used for store announcements was buzzing faintly, emitting a low, almost growling frequency. He knew the system only made that noise when receiving an external command, like an announcement override. But no one was connected at this hour. The buzzing grew louder, vibrating the metal casing, until it stopped abruptly. The store returned to silence, but the pause felt unnatural, as if something had been interrupted. A cold draft slipped past him, brushing across his arm like fingers dragging through the air. He swung around, but no one was there. He checked the front entrance locked. Then he turned toward the rear exit, the same door whose handle had moved moments earlier as he approached it. The floor beneath him began to vibrate slightly, not enough to knock anything over, just enough to feel like a large truck was passing outside. But there was no sound of an engine, no headlights, no movement outside the glass. The vibration intensified. He stumbled backward, eyes fixed on the rear exit. Then, with a slow, dreadful inevitability, the metal handle began turning again, this time in complete silence. No creaking, no clicking, just a smooth, controlled movement, as if whoever or whatever was behind it wanted him to watch. He backed away, heart hammering against his ribs. Suddenly, every monitor in the security room flickered simultaneously, casting flashes of white light across the dark aisles. The store plunged into darkness for half a second, then came back. On every screen, the same message appeared in bold red letters. System override detected, and beneath it, a new line began writing itself automatically. Rear exit, opening. The guard's eyes widened as he read the automated message on the monitors, his pulse racing faster than ever. The words seemed almost alive, typing themselves out without a human hand guiding them. Rear exit, opening. The implication hit him like a punch. Something was controlling the store's security system, something outside normal comprehension. His rational mind screamed at him that this was impossible. Yet every flicker, every glitch, every unnatural movement he had witnessed tonight confirmed that logic no longer applied. Instinctively, He reached for the walkie-talkie to call for backup, but the device emitted only static, then fell silent. The store's landline was dead, the internet disconnected. It was as if every method of communication had been intentionally severed. Panic tightened around his chest, but he forced himself to move, taking cautious steps toward the rear exit. The door, now fully still, looked ordinary, almost innocuously sober. He remembered the way the handle had turned on its own. One slow, deliberate turn, as though testing him, daring him to come closer. He inched forward, the concrete floor cold beneath his shoes. Every instinct screaming to run, yet curiosity rooted him in place. A sudden movement in the corner of his eye made him spin. For a split second, he thought he saw the same pale woman from the CCTV footage standing inside the rear exit corridor. Her head tilted slightly, eyes locked onto him, frozen in an expression that was neither angry nor fearful, but deeply unnatural. Then, in the blink of an eye, she vanished. The guard stumbled backward, tripping over a chair, his heart hammering. The monitors flickered violently. One by one, all 8 camera feeds showed distorted images. Faces that weren't there flashed briefly on the screens, each distorted beyond recognition, each vanishing as soon as he tried to focus. The sound of faint whispers filled the room, unintelligible yet chilling. They seemed to come from every direction at once, bouncing off walls and ceilings, making it impossible to locate their origin. His skin crawled, hair standing on end as a cold draft swept through the room again. Then the rear exit door handle moved once more, but this time accompanied by a subtle scraping noise from the floor, as if heavy footsteps approached the door from the other side. The guard froze, knowing he was trapped. Every rational thought screamed to flee, yet he couldn't turn his back. He had to witness whatever was coming. The handle twisted slowly, almost mockingly, a prelude to an unseen force about to step through. He gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white, breathing shallow, eyes locked on the door. Every second stretched, dragging into an eternity, until a sudden metallic clang echoed through the store. The handle jolted violently, then stopped. Silence returned, deep, suffocating silence, but the sense of imminent presence lingered like a heavy fog, pressing down on him, warning that this night was far from over. The guard's legs trembled as he backed away from the rear exit, every nerve screaming that he shouldn't be there. The heavy, unnatural silence seemed to thicken around him, pressing against his chest. He tried to rationalize the event's malfunctioning cameras, electrical surges, hallucinations, but deep down, he knew logic had abandoned him. Something else was present, something aware, watching, and controlling the environment with terrifying precision. Suddenly, the monitors flickered once more, but this time all 8 screens converged to display a single, panoramic shot of the rear corridor. The camera feed revealed a tall, shadowy figure standing just out of reach of the door. It had no discernible facial features, only the outline of a human form, elongated unnaturally. Its posture was rigid, almost statuesque, yet the air around it seemed to ripple, like heat waves rising off pavement on a summer day. The guard felt his stomach churn as the figure began moving, not walking, but gliding toward the door with a speed and smoothness that defied natural movement. He scrambled backward, tripping over a stack of boxes, heart pounding in his ears. Every instinct screamed escape, but the exit doors were locked. The front door remained sealed, and the rear exit handle twitched as if responding to the figure's approach. The guard's eyes darted to the ceiling, cameras, none captured the figure in full. Some distorted its form, others blanked out entirely. It was as though the entity existed partly outside the camera's perception, a presence that straddled the line between reality and something far darker. A low, guttural hum began emanating from the speaker system. At first subtle, almost inaudible, it gradually intensified into a reverberating vibration that rattled the monitors and shelves. The guard covered his ears, but the sound penetrated his skull, causing a nausea that nearly doubled him over. It felt alive, intelligent, probing, scanning for weaknesses. Every flicker of the screen coincided with the figure's movement. Every glitch seemed purposeful. Panic consumed him, yet a morbid curiosity anchored him in place. Then, on the main monitor, the figure stopped, just outside the doorframe, head tilted slightly, observing the guard. In the shadows behind it, he thought he saw fleeting glimpses of the pale woman from the first footage. Her presence ethereal, almost translucent. The entity raised an arm. Elongated and unnatural, and the rear exit door slowly creaked open from the outside, revealing nothing beyond the darkness. The guard's breath caught, realizing there was no threshold, no floor beyond the door, just a black void that seemed to stretch infinitely. And then, without warning, the figure stepped forward and vanished into the void, leaving the rear exit swinging open, empty and silent, as if nothing had ever been there.
The guard stood frozen, staring at the rear exit, the door swaying slightly in the draft, or perhaps in the absence of it. His chest heaved, every inhale burning as adrenaline coursed through his veins. He wanted to step back, to run, to escape, but something rooted him in place. The empty corridor beyond the door seemed impossibly deep, a black void swallowing all sense of space. The shadows inside flickered unnaturally, responding to some unseen rhythm. It was then he noticed something on the floor, a faint outline, almost like the ghostly imprint of the woman's feet from earlier, glowing slightly, as if burned into the concrete. As he watched, the imprints began to stretch and shift, crawling toward him, slowly forming an abstract shape he couldn't comprehend. The monitors buzzed violently, displaying static frames interspersed with flashes of the woman's face, her eyes wide, staring directly at him from impossible angles. The whispers returned, layered now, overlapping voices that seemed to circle the room, sometimes near, sometimes from above, always unintelligible, yet unmistakably urgent. A sudden metallic clang from the rear exit jolted him upright. He could feel a presence just beyond the door, patient, calculating, aware of every movement. The store lights flickered, then went out entirely, plunging the room into darkness. Only the monitors glowed, revealing glimpses of shifting shadows that darted at impossible speeds. The air turned icy, frosting the guard's breath, making his skin crawl as if tiny invisible fingers trailed across his neck and arms. The whispers intensified, now merging into a discernible pattern, a distorted guttural chant repeating over and over, like an incantation from a forgotten language. His rational mind screamed at him to flee, but every instinct told him that the entity wanted him to watch, wanted him to feel the inevitability of its presence. Then, in a sudden burst of motion, the rear exit swung wide, revealing the black void once more. Something moved inside it, an impossible, elongated form, partially human, partially something else, shifting, bending, and warping, as if reality itself were stretching around it. The guard stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, desperate to maintain sight. He caught a glimpse of the pale woman again, her face frozen in silent horror, her eyes reflecting an eternity of fear. She seemed trapped within the void, suspended between worlds. The entity outside the door reached toward her, and the monitors went black simultaneously, leaving only a faint red glow emanating from the system alert, Presence confirmed. A deafening silence followed. The air hung heavy, suffocating. The guard's pulse raced uncontrollably as he realized that whatever had entered his store was no longer constrained by time or space. The void beyond the rear exit pulsed subtly, almost breathing, waiting. And somewhere deep in the static of the monitors, he could have sworn he heard a whisper calling his name.
The guard's knees buckled as he stumbled back from the rear exit, eyes locked on the void beyond the door. The air was thick, suffocating, each breath tasting metallic, as if the room itself had become a living entity. He could hear the faint whisper again, this time distinct, deliberate, almost mocking. It was calling his name, slow, drawn out, echoing from every corner, every shadow, and every flicker on the monitors. The red warning lights pulsed in sync with his racing heartbeat. Suddenly, the pale woman appeared again, standing just inside the void. Her body shimmered, semi-transparent, like smoke illuminated by moonlight. Her eyes locked onto his, wide with silent terror. Behind her, shapes moved, dark and shifting, impossible forms that defied physics, their limbs bending at angles no human could endure. They reached toward her and she flinched, but did not disappear. Instead, she raised a hand, pointing directly at him as if demanding he witness what was happening. The guard felt a cold grip on his spine, an icy pressure that crawled upward, paralyzing him. The void pulsed rhythmically, drawing in shadows from the store itself. Objects trembled, monitors flashed violently, and whispers multiplied into an indistinguishable roar. His rational mind screamed to run, but every step was frozen in place by a fear that wasn't just instinct. It was a premonition of something eternal. Then, without warning, the void surged forward. The rear exit door slammed shut violently, but the blackness seeped into the room through cracks, creeping along the floor, wrapping around shelves, brushing the guard's ankles like living silk. The monitors displayed fragments of impossible images, the pale woman screaming, silently, elongated shadows writhing, twisted faces appearing and vanishing, and the words "Join us" scrawled across the screens in deep red, self-generating. A sudden flash blinded him for a moment, and when he opened his eyes, the store was silent. The door was locked again, the void was gone, the whispers ceased. Only the faint shimmer of the monitors remained, showing the empty rear corridor, as if nothing had happened. Trembling, the guard sank to the floor, unable to comprehend what he had witnessed. He knew, deep down, that it wasn't over. Whatever had been in that store that night had left its mark, and some part of it had followed him, invisible, patient, waiting. Hours later, when the police finally arrived, they found no trace of intrusion, no evidence of tampering. CCTV footage from other nearby locations showed nothing unusual. The store appeared completely normal. But the guard never returned to work. He would tell anyone who asked, "Something watches from the shadows. It sees more than we do. And if you ever find yourself alone, just watch your cameras closely." And in the silent nights that followed, those who dared to peek at Hilford Road reported the same faint flicker under the streetlight where the woman once stood, as if the air itself remembered, whispering, warning, and waiting for the next witness.